So in this demo, I'm going to show everybody how to do some simple crochet stitches. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our yarn and we're going to make a 4, the shape of a 4. You'll take the tail end of the 4 and stick it up through the center and pull down, creating kind of a slip knot. And then just pull that knot in and around the crochet hook. So I am going to hold my hook in my right hand and hold my yarn in my left hand. So I'll put my yarn over to my left, and the crochet hook has 3 important parts to it. One is an indentation in the center, which is the handle. The second is the hook, which is at the very top. You can kind of see this hook shape. And then the third is the space in between the hook and the handle, and that's going to determine the size of your stitch, of the crochet stitch every time. So it's important that every time we make a new stitch, we slide the yarn so it's over that center part of the hook so that all the stitches remain uniform. So the first thing we're going to do is make a chain. And the way that I'll do that is I'll take my crochet hook and I'll hold it with my right hand at the handle. Now with my left hand, I'm going to take the yarn that's attached to my ball and drape it around my first finger of my left hand. So my left hand just came in, my pointer finger is under that yarn. Now I'm going to take the rest of my fingers and kind of clasp on to the remainder of that yarn. And then with my thumb and my middle finger, I'm holding the knot, or we'll call it a knot, that's underneath our very first stitch. So this is the setup. Right hand pinches the handle, left hand, first finger under the yarn, the rest of the hand grasping around the yarn, and kind of a holding point is the knot underneath the crochet hook. Okay, now we're ready to do some crocheting. So I have what is kind of like an opening or a little triangle here with my yarn. So that's kind of holding it under tension over my pointer finger. I'm taking the hook, going inside of the triangle to the outside. So I'll do that again. Inside of the triangle to the outside, kind of turning the hook as I go. So I grasp the hook and I'm pulling it through the stitch. And then sliding it back down to the center of my hook, which is going to make my uniform stitches every single time. Okay, let's do that again. So instead of keeping my hand down here where I'm pulling tension and changing the size of my stitch, I'm going to move that pinch up to the knot, or the crossing of the yarn, directly below the hook. So I'm just moving my finger and thumb up a little bit. I have that same tensioned triangle, and I'm going in, around, and through. Moving my pinch up, in, around, and through. And now what you're making is a chain. So you can see my 3 stitches that have come down from the hook. So the only thing I'm ever really concerned about here is the stitch that's on my actual crochet hook at any given time. So I'm now just going to make a chain. And I'll go ahead, maybe 20 stitches. So I can count to myself to 20, or I can just approximate. So we're going to start by making a rectangle. So taking this thread and making a square rectangular plane. So that looks good. This is what my chain looks like. So it's really important that all of my stitches are loose. I'm not pulling really tight because then it's going to be hard to do the second row. So it looks kind of wonky. It's a little bit, all over the place, but it's cool. It's going to be fine. So it kind of looks like a bunch of loop-de-loops basically around, that are kind of going around in a straight line. Totally fine. All right, next. So this part is fairly easy. We're gonna just kind of work with the larger O's. So there's some crossing happening at the bottom and then larger O's. So I'm gonna put the larger O's towards the top. And then I'm gonna skip my first O, I'll explain why later, and I'm gonna put my hook into O number 2. So now I have 2 stitches on my crochet hook. And this is the same action from the chain, in, out, and through the first loop. Now you'll notice I still have 2 stitches on my hook. Hopefully you can see this, my hook is white as well. Now this is the part that's different. Same action, in, pulling through, but now I'm going through both loops, okay? What you just did is called a single crochet stitch. So let's try that again. Inside the next O, so front to back, in and around the string and through the first hole, and then around and through both. And I'm just gonna do that and continue to do that all the way down my chain. So get some more yarn. And I'm not really concerned, again, with anything that's happening except the stitch directly under my hook. I'm never pulling very tight because I really want I want enough space for my hook to be able to pass through that hole very easily. So you can see it's kind of curling. I'm not worried about it. I'm only holding on to the stitch directly onto my handle, onto the hook. Okay, I've just reached the very end of my first row. Yay! And I look at it, it's kind of worm-like. It's really curly still. It's not lying flat. Do not worry about it. Okay. So I know which way I'm oriented because the tail, or where I began, is at the bottom right-hand corner, and my hook should be directly above it. So if I lay this down, you can see my row, the tail, and the yarn that's connected to my ball. Okay, so it's important we're making a rectangle, and in order to make this jump from the row that we're currently on to the next row, I need a chain stitch in between, because we basically have to imagine taking a piece of thick rope and folding it over on itself. So where it's making that turn is going to create space. And so we have to make a chain stitch to allow for that space. So that's the same thing. I'll do that again, just in case you don't remember. So I have my hook, I'm going in, out, and through. That was the chain stitch. Now I'm going to skip the chain stitch and go directly into my next stitch. Okay, and where the heck am I putting my hook now? So this is the trickiest part, and when you get this part, you're gonna say, aha, I totally understand crochet. But if you look at the top of your stitch, that's actually creating a series of little V's. I'm going inside the top of the V. That's the next stitch. So I'm going into the center of the V and up through the basically top of the V. And then around the first one, around the second one. So I'm going, always looking for my next V, and that's where I'm putting the crochet hook in. Sometimes it can get a little twisty. So it's important to always think back to the V. It's also possible that, you know, on your first go for it, you're going to find a hole that isn't actually the place where the hook belongs. Don't worry about it. what you'll soon learn is that one of the reasons that crochet is so amazing is that it's very organic and it can go in any direction you want it to. So even though this is the right way of doing it, you're still going to make stitches and create form from going anywhere. So I'll keep going until I reach the end of my row. And this is also kind of tricky. Sometimes it's hard to know where the end is. So I'm looking for that very last V. And sometimes as a result of just the process, the very last stitch ends up looking a little small, and you do kind of have to fudge it and just find an opening and go for making that last stitch to make your plane perfectly rectangular. So here we are. It's getting somewhere. I've now done 2 stitches plus my base or my chain stitch, and I can do whatever I want from here. But if I wanted to do another row, I would make 1 chain stitch, skip that chain, go into the next hole, and keep going back the other way. All right, but what did I just say about the possibilities of it becoming a really organic form? So right now, instead of continuing down my row, I could just kind of create a new chain. And I could do I could connect that chain wherever I wanted it to. So I could connect it back to the beginning. I could start knitting in a circle or crocheting in a circle. I could just skip over maybe 5 or 6 stitches and connect it back to the original row. Let's try that. So here we go. Here are my V's that I'm looking out for. I'm gonna skip a bunch and go just find another random one and go and finish my row. So what I'm doing here is just kind of organically creating a form as I go. And once I reach the end of the row, I can go anywhere I want. Remember that last stitch of the row is always going to be a little weird, so you might have to, with a little bit more force, find an opening for the hook. So now what I have is 3 rows going on the left and this sort of weird loop up here. So you can see that I've started to make kind of a form. And if I keep going, I can continue to round out this shape. I can start to make a new shape, and I can really create a plane that is completely organic and completely spontaneous to the process.